Foreign interference, breaking Iran's national sovereignty. What is national sovereignty? The idea that independent nations have a right to exist without other nations' interference. Since the end of World War II, the United States has successfully overthrown 34 countries' governments. The first overthrow occurred in Iran in August 1953. The United States of America broke the barrier of Iran's national sovereignty and toppled its constitutional monarchy in a time of peace. Iran is rich in oil, but during the 19th and early 20th centuries, the country was so desperately poor that the country's leaders sold concessions to other nations to raise money. In 1901, Shah Muzaffar al-Din sold the exclusive right to obtain, exploit, and develop any oil found in Iran to the Englishman William Knox D'Arcy for £20,000. In return, the Shah and his descendants would receive 16% of the profits. D'Arcy's concession was turned into the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. In 1908, the British government bought 51% of the oil company's shares, and it became the most profitable business in the world for England. Though the concession would be reduced as the years went on, the Iranian people grew angry at seeing their country's biggest and most lucrative financial resource drained into the coffers of foreigners. During this time, Iran went through several revolutions. The Shahs were forced to create a majlis, or parliament. The Shah's power was relinquished until all they controlled was the military. On March 7, 1951, the Prime Minister of Iran, Ali Ras-Marah, was shot and killed in a mosque, leaving an opening in the government. On March 25th, Mohammad Mossadegh, a popular politician, was voted in as Prime Minister on the condition that the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company would be nationalized. The oil and refinery would now belong to Iran, and Mossadegh became a national hero. The British were furious over their loss of income and control of the refinery. Compromises were offered by the English and Americans, but all failed. The British retaliated by wrecking the Iranian economy with tariffs and seizing any ship carrying oil out of Iran. They plotted a coup, but Mossadegh found out and shut down the British embassy in October 1952. Finally, the British turned to the Americans for help in staging a coup against Mossadegh, but President Harry Truman turned them down. On January 20th, 1953, President Dwight Eisenhower came to office. At this time, the Korean War was ending. Iran, with its large oil reserves, bordered the USSR. The U.S. feared that Iran and its oil would become communist and fall behind the Iron Curtain. On May 10, 1953, the CIA and the British Secret Intelligence Service, or SIS, met and agreed on a coup to overthrow Mossadegh and regain control of the oil and refinery. The plan, codenamed Operation Ajax, was to be led by 37-year-old CIA agent Kermit Roosevelt. When Roosevelt arrived in Iran, he, through agents, began to pay off newspapers to tarnish Mossadegh in an attempt to turn the Iranian people against him. Retired General Vazola Zahedi was chosen by the CIA and SIS to succeed Mossadegh as Prime Minister. He was given $135,000 to persuade other military officers to join him. One key person to be convinced for this coup to work was Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Roosevelt needed him to sign a royal decree removing Mossadegh from office and replacing him with Zahedi. This would make it look official, although legally only the Majlis could do so. The Shah feared that if the coup failed, his life and the monarchy would be in danger. The Shah agreed to meet Roosevelt in secret to discuss the coup. They met in two separate cars, pulled up next to each other at midnight. In the early nights of August 1953, Roosevelt explained the plan of the coup. The Shah finally agreed to sign the papers, on the condition that he and his wife could leave Iran until the coup was accomplished. On August 15, 1953, the coup began. That night, Colonel Namatollah Nasiri, commander of the Imperial Guard, was tasked to arrest Mossadegh and members of his cabinet. When Nasiri arrived at Mossadegh's house, he stepped through the gate and was arrested by officers loyal to Mossadegh. The coup had failed. To this day, it is still not known how Mossadegh found out. Nasiri and other officers in league with Zahedi were arrested. Zahedi went into hiding in a CIA safehouse as Mossadegh rose victorious. Roosevelt's plan was foiled, but he refused to give up. He planned a second coup for 4 days later. he still had key assets, the newspapers and money. Mossadegh had refused to shut down any newspaper printing articles against him because of his strong belief in the freedom of the press. On Monday, August 17, 1953, mobs hired by the CIA began to form and clash in the streets of Tehran, Iran's capital, creating chaos. Mossadegh ordered the police not to interfere because the people had the right to protest. Hired rioters, claiming to support Mossadegh, looted shops and destroyed pictures of the Shah. On Tuesday, the 18th, Roosevelt sent U.S. Ambassador Loy Henderson to Mossadegh. Henderson exaggerated to Mossadegh that Americans were being mistreated in all the rioting. Mossadegh ordered the police out and sent soldiers under the command of General Mohammad Daftari to subdue the crowds. The problem with this plan was that Daftari was in league with Zahedi. The police and military smashed into crowds with sticks and tear gas. Mossadegh told his supporters not to go out protesting the next day. That same day, Roosevelt received a telegram from the CIA. Operation has been tried and failed, and we should not participate in any operation against Mossadegh which could be traced back to us. Operations against Mossadegh should be discontinued. Kermit Roosevelt ignored this in a last attempt to break the barrier of Iran's national sovereignty. With Mossadegh's supporters diminishing and most of the police and military on the side of Zahedi, the stage was set for Wednesday, August 19th. Mobs formed early that morning shouting, "Long live the Shah!" and were soon joined by the police. Sections of the military slowly arrived and joined the mob taking control. They freed those loyal to Zahedi that had been arrested in the first coup, including Colonel Nasiri, commander of the Imperial Guard, who sent them into action against Mossadegh. As the afternoon wore on, pro-Shah tanks and trucks arrived, attacking government buildings and secured them. Late that afternoon, the coup forces turned lastly on Mossadegh's house, but this was not so easy to take. The defenders there had machine guns and Sherman tanks. Roosevelt received word from Washington telling him to flee the country. Roosevelt ignored this message as well. He then received news of the attack on Mossadegh's house and decided to send Zahedi to the radio to claim victory. Zahedi did, and proclaimed himself prime minister through the Shah's order. The battle for Mossadegh's house lasted for 2 hours and ended about 7 p.m. The attackers stormed in and ransacked the house, but Mossadegh had escaped. At the end of the day, around 300 people were dead, and Zahedi, the Shah, and the CIA were victorious. The next day at 6 p.m., Mossadegh called to turn himself in. The Shah arrived back in Tehran on Saturday, August 22nd, to cheering crowds, 1 week after the first coup's failure. The CIA had successfully broken the barriers of Iran's national sovereignty. Zahedi began removing anyone from the government or military suspected of sympathizing with Mossadegh. Mossadegh was sentenced to 3 years in prison, then house arrest in his home away from Tehran, and would later die in 1967. The CIA gave the new government $5 million to help start it up. The Shah became a dictator, eventually removing Zahedi as prime minister in 1957 and sending him to England as a diplomat. Fast forward to April 1st, 1979, when the Shah was overthrown by the people and fled to the United States. On November 4th, 1979, 300 Iranian students stormed the United States Embassy building and held 52 hostages for 440 days in retribution. And the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company? The spark that ignited this turmoil? The British resumed operation in 1954, but under the name Mossadegh had given it, the National Iranian Oil Company. The deal was financially better for Iran now, but the Shah and his supporters had again sold off their country's greatest resource for power. The CIA had wrongly broken the barrier of Iran's national sovereignty by infiltrating its government and staging a coup against a democratically elected leader over the false fear of a communist takeover. Since 1953, relations between America and Iran have never recovered from this betrayal.